In this video, we'll be telling you about the history of Bamburgh Castle. And this week helping us will be Miss Rachel, one of the most amazing guides in Bamburgh Castle.
I'd like to welcome you to Bebbanburg. Bebbanburg was the royal capital of the Kingdom of Northumbria, which at one time was the most powerful kingdom in Britain. So I'm going to tell you about some of the early Anglo-Saxon kings, starting in the late 6th century and moving through the 7th century. Now, many of these stories weren't written down at the time. It was only in later centuries that monks in their monastery wrote down these stories. The most notable of these was the Venerable Bede, writing in his monastery in Jarrow. And Bede actually was quite accurate in what he wrote, because obviously these events had happened up to sort of 100 or more years earlier, but Bede did pretty well. Now, they say that Northumbria was conceived in treachery and nurtured in blood. So you're going to hear about a lot of backstabbing, and you're going to hear about a lot of actual stabbing as well. To be an Anglo-Saxon king was a death sentence. Anglo-Saxon kings didn't live for very long. They usually got their kingdoms on the battlefield and then they lost them on the next battlefield. What was happening up here in North Northumberland? Well, a man called Ida the Flamebearer came across here in the year 547, came up to North Northumberland, and eventually he created this kingdom called Bernicia. Now, I'm going to skip a little bit of Ida and his sons and go straight to his grandson, who was called Athelfrith the Destroyer. Athelfrith the Destroyer certainly lived up to his reputation. He was a fearsome pagan king. Now, like many rulers, he wasn't content with the territory that he had. He wanted to expand it, and he looked to the south, to the kingdom of Deira, which ran from Humber up to the Tees. So it bordered Bernicia. So he marched with his army down to Deira. He killed the king and he kidnapped his young daughter, a girl called Acha, who was only about 16, and he brought her back up here to Bebbanburg. Now, the accuracy of that story is a bit hazy, but it's a good story. So poor old Acha, she was brought up here and she was basically forced into a marriage. Now, eventually Acha and Athelfrith had several children, but you only need to remember 2 of those for the purposes of this talk, and they were Oswald and Oswy, 2 of the greatest kings of Northumbria. At the time that Acha was kidnapped, her older brother Edwin, he was forced to flee from Athelfrith, because during those times, if you were a king, you would kill any rival to your throne and any of your rivals' successors. He spent some time in the Kingdom of Gwynedd in North Wales, in Mercia in the Midlands, and eventually he found himself in the Kingdom of East Anglia, in the court of King Radwald. So anybody heard about the Sutton Goose ship burial in Suffolk? Now, there is a possibility, and it is only a possibility, that Radwald is the man who was buried in that ship, but obviously nothing has been proven. So he and Edwin became good friends, but all that time Athelfrith continued to hunt for Edwin, sending spies around the country to find him. Eventually they tracked him down to Radwald's court, and Athelfrith sent messengers with arms and treasure to Radwald, urging him to kill Edwin. But Radwald, who was a good friend of Edwin's, he kept refusing, until one occasion Athelfrith threatened to go down to East Anglia with his army to kill Edwin and all his people and ravage his kingdom, and he was certainly very capable of doing that. So obviously Radwald was very perturbed by this, so he decided the only way that he could save his people and his kingdom was to kill Edwin. But Athelfrith hadn't counted on Radwald's wine. When she found out what he was going to do, she told him that he was a dishonourable king for accepting money and treasure to kill a friend. And Radwald knew that she was right, and he and Edwin marched north into Northumbria with a great army, and they met Athelfrith on the River Idle between Lincoln and Doncaster. For Radwald, it was a tragic day because his son Regan here was killed, but then Radwald did kill Athelfrith in that battle, and Edwin assumed the crown of Northumbria. But if you thought Edwin was safe now that Athelfrith was dead, well, remember what I told you at the start. A messenger from Wessex, the King of Wessex, arrived at Edwin's home in York, but what he didn't know was that this man was carrying a deadly secret. As he delivered his message to Edwin without warning, he withdrew a poisoned dagger and lunged at the king. Fortunately, one of Edwin's loyal warriors threw himself in front of his king, took the full force of the blow, and died. But there was a man down in the kingdom of Mercia. His name was King Penda. He was very fearful of Northumbria. King Penda decided that he would have to go into Northumbria and fight Edwin. Now, to do that, he allied himself with King Cadwallon of Gwynedd. So Cadwallon and Penda, they marched north and they met Edwin at a place called Hatfield Chase. This was in the year 632, and this was near Doncaster, and two armies fought it out, and very sadly Edwin was killed. Now this gave Cadwallon carte blanche to go into Northumbria, and as they came into this kingdom, an orgy of slaughter and looting and burning ensues. This went on for a year or two, and despite a couple of attempts to stop Cadwallon, he was too powerful. So poor Northumbria really suffered. The people were killed, the land was burned. So what was going to happen now? It was in really dire straits. Well, let me take you back to Acha, Athelfrith's wife. When her husband was killed and Edwin came up to Northumbria to take the throne here, Acha knew that she and her children had to flee, because although Edwin was her brother and was uncle to her children, she knew that Edwin would kill them. So she had to leave and find somewhere else. Now we know that the boys ended up on the island of Iona, which was the centre of the Irish Celtic Christian community up in the west of Scotland. But we don't know what happened to Acha. She is mentioned only once in any of the chronicles and the writings of that time, and that was by Bede, who merely referred to her as the mother of King Oswald. So Oswald and Oswy, these two young boys, they grew up on Iona. They were horrible little pagan boys when they went, but they did convert to Christianity. They grew up to be great warriors. They fought for the kingdom of Dalriata, which was the kingdom up in the west of Scotland, and they often went off to Ireland and practiced their fighting skills. So when Cadwallon was rampaging through Northumbria, Oswald and Oswy decided that they must come back south and reclaim their father's kingdom. So they marched down through Scotland, collecting men as they went. Oswald knew that he had to be a bit canny when he was fighting Cadwallon, because his army was smaller and the men were perhaps a bit less experienced. So he chose an ideal spot. It was at a place called Heaven Field, which is on Hadrian's Wall near Hexham. He chose a high plateau in which to camp his army. The day before, he ordered his men to chop down a great tree. They made a wooden cross and erected it in the camp, and on that evening before the battle, Oswald gave his men a rousing speech. So the battle began, and sure enough, Cadwallon's men got the upper hand. But as the day wore on, the Northumbrian men began to make inroads, and Cadwallon realised that things weren't going to go his way. Now, Cadwallon was the victor of about 16 battles. He ran south across the River Tyne, and Oswald's men found him hiding in a wood, and they did what they had to do. So Oswald and Oswy came here to Bebbanburg. This was in 634. Oswald became a great king. Bebbanburg became a magnet for people from all over Britain and Europe. Bebbanburg was a very prosperous place. Now we're sitting here in what used to be the Norman Chapel, but we know that beneath this Norman chapel is the church which King Oswald had built while he was king here. He was actually called Whiteblade. That was his name, Whiteblade. because he was such a great warrior. But there's a big but coming. He came to the throne in 634. In 642, he and his army were down in Mercia. We don't know why, but unfortunately, he was attacked by Penda and his men and Oswald, and every person with him was killed. Now, Penda wasn't content enough with killing Oswald. No, here's the gory bit. He chopped off his head and his arms, and he hung them in a tree. Eventually, Oswald went down and retrieved his brother's head and his arms. He gave the head to the monks on Minda's farm, who were pretty horrified being presented with this, and they buried it. So Oswald became king here. Now, Oswald was pretty lucky. He got a long-term contract. He ruled for maybe just under 30 years and died in bed, an old man. He was a pretty good king, and Bebbanburg continued to prosper under his rule. He actually had 3 wives and several children. One incident during Oswald's reign, which I want to tell you about, involves our good friend Penda, who had an itch that he had to keep on scratching, and it was called Northumbria. So he came up here with his army, intending to finish off the Northumbrians once and for all. Now, at that time, and even much later, there were no dunes out there. We didn't have that wonderful dune system that we have now. The sea came right up to the castle rock. So Penda and his men had to camp out on the cricket pitch. But of course, it wasn't a cricket pitch then. It was just a boggy, soggy, wet, probably midgie-infested marsh. Now, Penda must have looked up at that great rock at the bottom of the hill there and thought, God, how the hell am I going to get in there? So he came up with a plan. He ordered his men to go out around the district and to tear down every building and come back with all the timber and all the thatch and stack them against the rock. Now, of course, the fortress at that time was completely wooden. There were no stone buildings. So when Penda lit his great fire, this mighty fortress was at great risk of burning down. Great blaze ensued, and the flames were getting higher and higher and higher. And guess what? Yes, a miracle happened. The wind suddenly changed direction, and all the flames and the smoke and embers fell down or rained down on Penda's army, and they fled. Oswald and Penda, later on, they did meet each other in battle, and Penda was eventually killed. But he was about 70, so I do give credit to Penda. He was a great survivor, and probably a great politician as well to have survived that long, but he did eventually fall to Oswald. Bamburgh Castle is one of the UK's most important archaeological sites. Excavations have taken place here, and surveys as well, since before 1960. Loads of great Anglo-Saxon artifacts, as well as other things, have been found. So when you go into the medieval kitchen, there are 2 fantastic items. One is the Bamburgh Beast, which is about the size of my little fingernail and is a very beautiful decorated piece of Anglo-Saxon gold. Next to the Bamburgh Beast, there are 2 stone fragments which were discovered in the 19th century somewhere in the grounds. An archaeologist worked out that they were from the left arm of the King of Northumbria's stone throne. And we do have a replica on the far side of the keep. So if you fancy sitting in there and having your photo taken, you're very welcome. When you get to the keep hall, which is behind the bottle-shaped door, there are several cabinets, artifacts which have been found here at the castle. The most prized treasure of those is the Bamburgh sword, and the Bamburgh sword, which was made in around the 7th century, a stranded pattern-welded sword. But I don't want you to get too excited, because all you're going to see is a stumpy bit of rusty iron. We have, however, very helpfully placed a replica in there, but the Bamburgh Research Project commissioned a blacksmith to recreate the sword, and he used exactly the same techniques that the original early medieval blacksmith would have used to create that blade. It also has a sword hilt. We don't know what the sword hilt is like, but what they did was they looked to the Staffordshire hoard, if you've heard of the Staffordshire hoard. It's possible that Oswald gave that hoard of treasure to Penda to shut him up and send him off. So we think this was Penda's hoard. There were lots and lots of sword hilts in there, so they used those sword hilts to create the sword that we have here.